All right. Hey, you guys. This is my friend Sarah, and I will let her tell you a little bit about what she does. But since we are reading this book, Fuzzy Mud, and it talks a lot about, um, a lot about honestly what's going on right now. We have coronavirus that we are dealing with, and it deals with the virus, the fuzzy mud. Well, I wanted you guys to meet Sarah because she herself is a scientist, and I want you guys to kind of know what's out there and what things you can do with science. So, Sarah, I'm going to start out by asking you, just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into your field of study.
Thanks, Sammy. Hi, guys. It's great to talk to you guys. My name is Sarah, and I grew up in Maryville, which is a small town near Knoxville, Tennessee. Um, Growing up, I always really loved nature. But I was not a very good math and science student necessarily growing up. In high school, I took AP Environmental Science, and it was the first science class that I had where all of my different sciences came together, and I thought that was really cool. So environmental science incorporates all sorts of subjects like biology or chemistry, even physics and social studies. And when I took that class in high school, I was really inspired by the cool labs we got to do. We went down to monitor our really gross creek in our neighborhood, and we got to do a lot of different studies on pollution and different like social aspects of the environment. And so I went to University of Tennessee for my undergraduate degree, and my major was called environmental soil science. So I studied dirt. It was really awesome. And in doing that, I got to have a lot of really cool summer jobs and do a lot of really nice experiences. So I worked at a summer camp that was all about environmental education, as well as going to Central America to study the soils there. So studying soils has been a really amazing adventure. And these days I live in Georgia and I study oak trees. So it's been a little bit of a transition. My larger subject is called Ecosystem Ecology, which is the study of how soil and plants and air all interact together in an ecosystem.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I'm so glad you touched upon the fact that you got to travel. I think, and to my students, I hope you guys know that when you get opportunities in college like this, there are opportunities to travel. So that makes me really happy to hear that. I'm also glad that you touched upon all the subjects working together when you were growing up, and because we actually are interdisciplinary, so our kids learn all the subjects together. We always have a theme, so our kids are super familiar with that.
Awesome.
I guess I'm also curious, like, why did you choose to focus on environmental studies?
I also like, I think my main appeal was I was always interested in current issues like global climate change, and I was always interested in contributing to that conversation somehow. And I loved that interdisciplinary nature of the environmental sciences. And yeah, it was a way for me to bring my other interests into being a scientist.
Awesome. I love that. That again, that makes me happy to hear. I think some of our students will be glad to know that. So my last question for you is, we're reading this book. It's called Fuzzy Mud. It's the same author as Holes, which our students might not know that book as well as we do, but we grew up with that book. But basically, it's about an experimental alternative fuel. It's called bioline. And kind of in short, it actually mutates into this fuzzy mud, and it spreads into this town and becomes really harmful to a lot of the residents there, which is pretty similar to what we're
Mhm.
going through now with our current pandemic. So I guess I'm just curious, I'm curious, how do you think people in your field will be dealing with issues like this in the future? It seems like we could have some things like this pop up in the future. I know you deal with climate change, so if you could just touch upon that.
Totally. So I think a common theme that we run into in all of the sciences is unintended consequences. And so nature is incredibly complex. And as scientists and humans, we're always trying to figure out the answer and figure out the best solution to help. However, there's a lot of things we don't know, and a lot of things that interact in ecosystems to produce things like fuzzy mud. So whether it's like a pandemic, like the one we're currently in, and that might be a product of how we manage wildlife, or in my case, dealing with oak trees, sometimes the old ways of thinking produce these consequences that we don't anticipate in the past. So in my study, a lot of forest scientists in the past used to think that fire in the southern Appalachian Mountains was a very bad thing, and they suppressed the use and burning of fire for about 50 years. And so today we're discovering that that fire suppression has actually hurt the ecosystem. And so we're constantly learning new things about how to manage our resources, and some things that we think are good today might be bad tomorrow.
Mhm. I'm glad you talked about how we manage our ecosystems and our resources. Our students have learned a lot. We did a case study on the wolves of Yellowstone. And to all my students, if you don't remember what I'm talking about, I'm very upset with you because we spent weeks on that. But they're pretty familiar with how we have these unintended consequences. So in the case of removing the wolf, the kids got to observe how it impacted the ecosystem and put it out of balance. So I'm glad you touched upon that. Anyways, thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate you answering some questions, and hopefully to all my students out there, this was helpful. And maybe you guys, this opens up a door. You know, some careers that are out there in science, because I want all of you to be scientists, of course, but you get to do whatever you want. That's your choice.